Chapter 2. It was believed by many that the world of Sephira was incomplete. The old legend stated that Sephira had originally been part of a larger masterpiece when mortal time was in its infancy. When the caretakers of the divine garden had been corrupted by sin, the masterpiece had been ripped asunder and had been fragmented into many other worlds. All of the new shards were samples of Eden's former glory. None were perfect. Within the Wine Valley is the Duchy of Wheatvale. Under the first dukes of Wheatvale the duchy and its people prospered. Alas, prosperity was fleeting, for a vulgar spirit of cruelty descended upon Duke Stormbringer and he viewed his people as slaves, the minstrel sang to the youth of Wheatvale as he strummed his lute. Kiva Woodwright stood listening to the traveling singer share the story of her people. She knew the plight of the citizens of Wheatvale all too well. She had grown up in the chaos that had consumed the duchy after the cruel Duke Stormbringer was removed from power. Not long after the oppressive Duke Stormbringer was deposed, the savage and brutal Savant had marched into Wheatvale and claimed it as their own. Kiva had heard her father and mother talk about what life had been like before the Savant ruled. The Savant did not worship the divine creator like the children of the Eternal did. They worshipped Sava, the god of war. The Savant dealt with imperfection ruthlessly. Children deemed imperfect at birth were killed by the priests of Sava and offered as sacrifices. The Savant believed strongly in sacrifice. They forced Kiva's people out of their homes inside the protective walls of the village and forced many to make new homes amid the dwellings and stables that stood on the outskirts of the village. It was considered a sacrifice that was made in order to establish the Savant Empire. As of late the Savant Empire had been suffering from growing pains. The Rood, a faction within the Savant, had received a new vision from Sava. The high priest of Rood had declared that the imperfect were not to be killed at birth. Instead they would be part of a newly formed servant class. This class would serve the Savant and Rood, but it would be above the Eternals whose village they had taken over. The Savant and Rood had gone to war with one another. The war had been fought mostly in the temple courts, but the threat of a conflict that would engulf the entire village was constant. During that time Kiva and many other youths were sent to villages where their relatives lived. There were a few skirmishes that spilled into the streets, but the Rood had fallen quickly when the temple guards had flooded into the final debate. The temple's elect guards were armed with swords and savagely cut the Rood down. With the war over, things returned to normal. And after several months the youth and children of Wheatvale were able to safely return home. Free of the threat of being caught in the middle of a clash between the Savant and the Rood, Kiva had ventured out into the market square. Dressed in a brilliant indigo gown, and a veil that could barely contain her ample deep amber tresses, Kiva stood out as she glided among the vendors. Kiva was well formed with silver eyes that many men in Wheatvale found enchanting. Her eyes were accompanied by soft elegant cheeks that were spiced with light freckles, and a delicate nose. The men also found the weight that Kiva carried on her hips an acceptable enhancement of her profile. She assumed that must be the case because she had caught a few of them gawking at her. It was the fact that she towered over many of the men that kept her single. The 6-foot-tall daughter of the master carpenter was beautiful, but she was also more than the Savant men could take. Kiva did not mind the fact that she scared off the Savant. The Savant were small and sickly in appearance. Many Eternals suspected that the toxic Nora berry that the Savant considered sacred and seasoned all of their food and drink with was the cause for the Savant's physical plight. The fact that many were murderous barbarians did not make them desirable either. If any group of men were crude enough to idolize a barbarian, it would be the Savant. The men wore pendants shaped like swords and axes. These they viewed as items that portrayed strength. Another display of strength that the men of Sava reveled in was scent. They did not believe that a man should smell weak, so bathing was not a part of male grooming or routine. The Savant men sneered at the fact that all Eterns bathed regularly. They ridiculed the Eternals and laughed, but the men at court demanded that the Savant women bathe and primp like an Etern. The rest of the Savant quickly followed suit. The Savant women seldom laughed at the Eterns on this subject. It was a trait that they greatly admired. It had also been rumored that Etern men were held in high esteem by Savant maidens. It was a rumor that did not amuse the men of the Savant court. Kiva's progress was cut short by the approach of two nobles on horseback. A nobleman and his lady were out for a ride through the market. Both nobles were dressed lavishly and the horses that they rode were just as well turned out as they were. As they drew closer, Kiva was able to see that Mort the village reeve was out riding with Ayant, daughter of Fian. Kiva had met her once through her brother Morkant. Morkant gleefully showered Kiva with compliments and had been most attentive when they had met. Ayant was the complete opposite. Ice would have been a more fitting name for the girl, at least that was what Kiva thought. "Greetings, Miss Kiva," Mort called out to her with a smile. Ayant sent a venomous glance in Mort's direction when they stopped. "Greetings, Reeve Mort," Kiva replied, ignoring Ayant who was attempting to put Kiva in her place with a haughty smile of tolerance. Being mounted on a horse was the only way that the ambitious maiden was able to look down on Kiva. "Are you off to market?" Mort inquired. I don't know if you will find the wares to your liking today. Perhaps you should not worry yourself with such trifles as the market," Mort suggested with a troubled expression. "Nonsense, I think that Miss Kiva will find exactly what she is looking for at the market today," I interrupted. "Come, friend Mort, we have so many things to do," Ayat announced and motioned her horse forward. Without another word Mort followed after Ayat. His departure was highlighted by a slight struggle with his horse. Kiva watched the couple ride out of her field of vision and could not help but feel the sting of Ayat's snub. The sting was not from jealousy, but anger at the pretense of high station that Ayat displayed. The Fian family was included in the savant court because they were Emperor Vix's preferred winemaker. In reality Kiva's family was just as prosperous as the Fians. Kiva's father was a gifted master carpenter that was sought out by many due to his skill and vision. Ayat knew how to ride a horse. Kiva didn't. It's not that she could not learn how to ride a horse, it was that she never had the interest to. Her family had always used a wagon as part of their profession, and she had learned how to control it. She had been teased by some of her friends over what they dubbed her fear of horses. Kiva did not fear all horses, just those bred by the savant. The savant's love of battle and mastery over another living creature had been incorporated into the horses that they bred. The savant, whom the emperor gifted with permission to breed horses, had created an ill-natured and short-tempered breed of horse that was barely controllable. The horses that were sired were so temperamental that none but the bravest of men would dare to attempt to ride them. Kiva's people had no desire to deal with the monsters that the savant had created and instead purchased horses from the neighboring duchy of Oakton. Fearing for the safety of their wives, daughters, and sisters, the men of Sava began to purchase the offspring of the Oakton horses as suitable mounts for ladies. It had been rumored that Emperor Vix had been furious with the practice, but he allowed it out of fear that the savant horses were beginning to pose a threat to the livestock market. "Kiva, what brings you to market today?" a familiar female voice called out. Kiva turned in the voice's direction, adjusted her parasol, and scanned the crowd. Kiva squinted in an attempt to compensate for the weak eyes that she had been born with. In a duchy ruled by the savant, being nearsighted could be dangerous. After a moment Kiva was able to make out the form of Amubel Potter, one of her closest friends. Amubel was dressed in a red gown, veil, and matching parasol. In her free hand she carried a small basket. "I'm here to restock on fragrant herbs for my next batch of perfumes," Kiva answered after Amubel walked over to where she was standing. "No more tutoring or serving at Lakeview Manor?" Amubel inquired. "Not since the root surrendered. Who knows what will happen now? 'Tis nice to be home though," Kiva began. "How did you bear your time away from your family and your gallant?" she added. "Being sent to my uncle's vineyard was a tribulation, but that is over now. What did you endure while exiled in Oakton?" "Well, I was a companion for one of the ladies of Oakton," Kiva began and skillfully shifted the subject. "Pray tell me, did you meet no man that captured your interest while you were at court?" Amubel pressed. "Nay, what makes you think that such a thing would happen?" Kiva challenged, hoping that the questioning would be short. "Dear friend Kiva, why wouldn't you be popular at court? You have more poise and manners than many, Amabel began. Kiva shifted her parasol in an attempt to hide her blush from those passing by. "Say, where is your to-be-wed?" Kiva interrupted. "He's journeyed to Oakton to buy sheep." "I pray he has a safe journey." "And what of your prospects, Kiva? I have heard that Sir Talon has doted on you with sweet words," Amabel pressed. "Sir Talon is gifted with a golden tongue," Kiva confessed. Her pinkish complexion reddened. Not long after her return to Weavale she had been called upon by Talon. He had drenched her with flattering compliments and had been the definition of charm. The meeting would have been swoon-worthy if not for a feeling that gripped Kiva's heart and shielded it. "He has a heavy purse too. 'Twill be a good match," Amabel pressed. "All of his golden words cannot overcome concerns I have. I fear that he flirts with the savant court too much for his title to be only honorary. At least he has not opted to display his strength through smell. A fortune could be saved on soap if he did," Amabel giggled.